You want to count me in? All right, welcome to the show, Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Radio Network. I'm here with Jennifer Hernandez of Legacy Mutual Mortgage.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going? Today's an exciting day.
Very exciting.
There's all this Wall Street stuff going on, and I clicked over to Mortgage News Daily to see what's going on with rates and all that. It's just kind of been a wacky 72 hours.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's every day has been a tornado of new surprises. Let's just say that.
I think it's because this is one of the things everyone keeps saying is, oh, now it's 2021 and 2020's over and we're all going to go back to normal. I'm like, no, we're not. It's just a continuation of the show, right? Like no one's really going to work. They're working from home. There's nobody's really watching any sports. It's still just lockdown and weird stuff at home. So
I don't know. There's traffic.
There is traffic. There's a little bit more traffic in there.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that the last couple of weeks. We were out at dinner, when was that? Night before last. And got there and got reservations and all that. And it was pretty quiet until about 8, 9-ish. And then it started getting kind of packed. Of course, it was Galleria, so maybe that's what it was. But yeah, starting to see a little bit of life, right?
Yeah,
come back.
A little bit.
So I was looking at the HAR report, HAR report, and some other things. Obviously, real estate is way, way up. Case-Shiller came out with their metrics, some of their data pretty recently. 9% increase in prices nationwide in the last 12 months. So it's getting kind of wild. All-time highs for new construction. New construction's getting more expensive. No surprise there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see this little note, and they talked about this during the election. Now it looks like it might come to fruition. Is a $15,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers. So if you guys thought you were busy in the mortgage business now.
Yeah, I'm putting my seatbelt on, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting pretty wild out there just to see that. And the interesting commentary that I've seen in a lot of the articles is we don't have a demand problem in real estate right now. There's plenty of people buying houses, right? Yeah. We have a supply problem. There's just not enough houses. And how is that going to fix the problem? Well, it isn't. It's just going to create more demand because now they get essentially $15,000 off on a house. So in your business, of course, you were here about a month ago. I imagine you really haven't seen that many changes unless you're just getting more and more busy every single day.
It has not slowed down. January always brings, you're on lots of people's to-do lists because holidays are over. And so we normally have an influx of more referrals and more leads in January. But it's different. I mean, this is by far the most busy January, February ever. And we give purchases to priority, so priority to purchases. But what we're seeing, especially in the sub 300 price range, 10 to, we heard a house 30 offers on a house a couple weeks ago. I think it was in kind of the Cypress 290 corridor, the popular areas where 250 and under is.
Yep.
And we're starting to hear, we're pre-approving someone right now. They're going to put on a builder contract this weekend. And he said, hurry, hurry, hurry. I need the pre-approval now because we're like one of 10 or 15 people that want this one lot that's coming live on Saturday, and I have to be the first in line for this lot. So we're starting to hear that. We're starting to hear that when you said building, price per square foot, one guy he said it was $130 a few months ago, and now the builder's jacking me around, and now it's $150. And so we're hearing these things on new build anyway, and then we're seeing it happen, oh yeah, the same. Thank goodness I got under contract months ago for this new build because now it's 13% higher, $30,000 higher. So that is definitely happening, which is going to eventually cause a bubble in affordability, right? I mean,
well, if you look back and look at 07, 08, I sat on a panel last week and it was fascinating. It was the hey, what happened last year and what are your predictions for this year? And a lot of people were talking about a real estate bubble. And I said, well, it was interesting because the guys on the panel, there was one guy in particular that said, well, most real estate investors have not been through a real estate crash. And I said, well, one of the things you have to recognize is real estate crashes are every 18 to 20 years. So it's likely through your career you might see two, but most likely you'll see one, and that's it. And the last crash is different than the next one, right? They're usually a little bit different. So the question comes back to affordability, and you're absolutely right. I've read a handful of white papers from Fannie and Freddie's economists years ago that predicted this would be the problem. So now what's the solution to it? I mean, giving people a tax credit is not going to help. Lowering rates isn't going to help anymore. We've got plenty of demand. How do you fix the supply problem?
Yeah, and I haven't had time to research, and I don't know if you've run across it, but what percent of people do you think are still holding out not selling because of coronavirus? Like, do you think it's 20%? Like, what type of?
Well, that's a good question. That is a really hard one to get at. And I'll tell you why, because and I'm just totally shooting from the hip on this. I think the people that are waiting to sell for Corona are also the same group of people who are a little bit older. They're looking to downsize the house. I imagine people like my parents' age, maybe somewhere around that age bracket. But then here's the problem with that. This started happening a couple of years ago, where they're like, hey, I got this really nice 3,000 square foot house. And they start looking around, and they realize, oh, wow, I can sell this house, but I'm not really downsizing in payment or value, even if it's paid off, or price. I'm just moving into another house that costs just as much as the one I'm in. So why would I move? Right, because it's becoming the appreciation is so rapid, especially below that $300,000-$400,000 price point. So I don't know what percentage of that is coronavirus related. Then you start to think, okay, is there pricing pressure being put on the neighborhoods in Cypress, Katy, Woodland, Sugar Land, those sorts of areas, not only because they've always had great schools, but because the houses are larger and because of the inner loop, 5,000 square foot house, 5,000 square foot lot with a 2,500 square foot house, you start realizing, wow, I'm on top of my neighbors here. And after all the protests and all that other stuff, maybe it's time for us to move outside the city. Millennials are coming of age. The median age for millennials now is 29. So we're starting to see those folks realize, usually the joke I always like to say, it's usually the girlfriend. It's, hey, we want to have kids, and I'm real tired of taking this dog out, the apartment complex. Like, it's time to grow up and move out into the burbs, right? So are there a lot of these older Americans that are not selling because of coronavirus? There's certainly a number. Is it 20%? I don't know, because you look at that change. The change in active listings is down like 30%. Is that 30% of the marketplace? That I can't answer. I don't know.
So here's, as you're bringing up the topic, and by the way, Jennifer Hernandez, Legacy Mutual Mortgage. Hey, if you need to reach me, I'm at loanwithjen.com. That's my website. And also check out my YouTube channel. It's Loan with Jen on YouTube. I've got over 200 videos.
And they're fantastic, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
They are. They're really good.
I release 2 videos a week. So if you're in the industry, it's great for you or your buyers. So something that's interesting as we're talking about this, and the biggest roadblocks to what we're seeing, we get lots of younger people that are calling us because Corona has forced people, like you said, I don't want to live in the burbs, or I don't want to live in this apartment anymore. I don't want to waste rent anymore on rent's not doing anything for me, right? Like, I'm missing out on appreciation,
well,
right?
The other thing too is when you look at those folks that got into some of those really nice Class A apartments, not only was I wasting rent, they shut down all the amenities. So I'm stuck in my box all day. I can't even go to the pool, right?
And you know what else they're doing? They're mixing in housing, HUD housing, with those Class A apartments.
And they're like,
so I had my massage therapist that I was at Massage Heights the other day, it was a gal that I didn't know, and she was talking, and she moved into this apartment complex that was, she thought Class A, and all of a sudden she started just seeing, trash around, and,
like,
people
what's
that
going
weren't
on here?
taking as much,
Right.
like what she would expect from a Class A apartments. And so she found out that there was some some people living there that weren't paying as much as she was,
Right.
and it's starting to degrade the community. And she was really upset. She's like, "Oh my God," you know. So that's happening. Also, and I don't know how much time we have left.
Well, let's do
until
this. Let's take
go
a
to
quick break, and then we're going to get back into this topic.
Yeah, I've
Jason
got some
Bible
predictions.
with I like the predictions. Jason Bible with Legacy Mutual Mortgage. Jennifer Hernandez. We will be right back. Let's do it. All right, it's Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Radio Network. I'm here with Jennifer Hernandez of Legacy Mutual Mortgage, and we're talking about the affordable housing thing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you bring this up because what we're seeing on the landlord side is the federal government, will pay much more than the market will to place. How can I put this? To place assisted housing is probably the best way to put it. So I can guarantee you that's what these landlords are doing. And the other problem is that there's not an eviction moratorium problem when you're taking in Section 8 housing because Section 8 pays. So we've moved all of our properties, with exception to our higher end ones, all to Section 8.
Because the government pays.
As the government pays.
But don't they have to pay a differential even if it's small, like a few $100?
They don't have to. They can, but they don't have to.
And if they don't, the government's swallowing it anyway.
Right. So if you look at the problem with what the eviction moratorium is causing is landlords like us are looking at our business model going, wait a minute, there's some more headaches that I have to deal with the housing authority. However, I also don't have to worry about the federal government stepping in and say, you can't evict those people and make them pay. Because we both, if you've owned rental properties before, if a tenant gets more than about a month behind, I have experienced a 99.999% chance they never catch up.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when Section 8 stops paying? Typically, that happens during federal government shutdowns. But as soon as the shutdown is over, a month or two at most, right, you get all those back payments. So I think it's very interesting that you mentioned that story because it's something we talked about. I just didn't think it would happen this soon, where landlords start looking around, especially these Class A. Mm-hmm. Class A, really nice apartment complexes. They're looking around. They're like, we got to have cash flow. Well, let's just start converting existing units to Section 8.
And they don't tell the other neighbors about it. They just find out by default.
Yeah, it's like, well, this is kind of changed around here. Like, what's going on?
Changed, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was, she's a single mom and her son is home alone during the day. And she says he's not hanging around with the right people, And so anyway, it adds complexity to another brewing issue. But regarding the $15,000 tax credit. So the last time that I saw this was Obama. During Obama, there was, I think it was 8,500.
I think it started under Bush, and then they kept it through Obama, if I'm not mistaken. Both of them were involved in some form or fashion.
So I had someone ask me about it recently, and I don't bring it up to people and talk about it because it's not official yet.
Yeah,
so
it hadn't been passed.
I'm real good at being neutral that way, so I don't talk about it till it's a real thing. But he said, "Oh, I heard that it's going to be a credit at closing." And I thought, well, I don't know, because the administration, like if we got to wait on the federal government to put money to closing, like that's going to be a nightmare.
That's going to be a mess.
So what it probably will be, I would think, is at the time you file your taxes, that next tax year, the next April, you will get this credit, just bottom line, like credit to offset, refund or whatever. So it's going to be interesting. It'll be really interesting. So what I predict, one thing that if anyone's listening and they have, friends, family, buyers, whatever, something that we run into an issue with now with young people that we see more and more is student loans. And student loans, conventional, as strict as conventional is in so many areas, they are more lenient on student loans.
Interesting.
So if you owe $200,000, I see such ginormous student loan payments.
Mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And they're never going to make salaries enough to pay it back. These
No.
are not doctors. These are just
Yeah, it's
normal
some
people.
private liberal arts school somewhere
Yeah.
that's $50,000 a
Yep.
semester, and it's
And
like,
they know that the students know that it's going to be forgiven at some point, and they're not interested. I can tell you 100% they're not interested in paying.
I mean,
ever.
if I had a $250,000 headwind and
Yeah.
I'm making $80,000 a year, I can tell you right now there is no way I'd even pay that thing off. I'd just wait.
So a conventional loan will allow us to take the income-driven repayment. It's called an IDR.
Okay.
So if you owe $350, I've got someone right now that owes $350. Her IDR is like $200.
Wow.
They base the income-driven repayment based on your ability to repay based on your current salary.
Wow.
So we will take the IDR, $200. However, FHA, which is the Federal Housing Administration, which is the government-sponsored loan, is more strict in this area.
Interesting.
And they require us to take 1% of the balance in calculating the debt-to-income ratio. So if you owe $350,000, that's a $3,500 payment. No one will qualify. I mean, it does not qualify the person. So what's happening is there's this rush to qualify for conventional that then you get into the credit requirements.
Right.
So because some people have so much student loan debt, and there's some people where I had one guy that he had they had 60 different entry lines in the credit that added up to the 350.
That's insane.
That were all the individual loans. Like, you need a loan, you go get it, and it's not, And because of all the individual entries, his credit score was in the 600s. And we did a simulation, we did a what if scenario. Like, we do all these things to say, when is his credit score going to be above a 680? Because when you have PMI, you really need to be above 680 unless you qualify for these. It gets complicated. I don't want to sound like an underwriter, but there's a way that you can go down to 620, but you have to make below a certain amount of income. Let me just put it to you that way. It's about 64,000. So there's a way that you can have 620 on conventional, but it's really not everybody qualifies for it. Let me just put it to you that way. And so he was in this bubble. He didn't qualify for the down to 620, and we ran the automated underwriting, and we couldn't get it because his credit was so bogged down by these student loans. So they've got to go conventional because the FHA payment will never qualify them. And then automated underwriting that's tweaked by Fannie Mae conventional is saying, hey, we don't want you because you're a risk. You have so much credit. So there's this bubble of people that can't go anywhere. It's like they're in purgatory. Like, they're just stuck. And he's like, you mean to tell me, like, he goes, well, and I'm a teacher so that I'm on the 10-year forgiveness so that I don't have to, so that in 10 years it's forgiven. I was like, well, he's like, are you telling me right now? He goes, I'm on that. I mean, I should be able to buy a house. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work that way. But he can't go anywhere and buy a house because of the student loan debt. So what's going to happen is we're seeing more and more people with student loan debt because educating yourself is amazing and it should happen and it's great. But my thoughts on that are like, how can these student loan people, whoever's approving these student loans, and the cost of education is so high, like, these people come out with this debt and they're strapped. Like, they can't, like, they're not going to be able to qualify because of these student loans, and it's a huge issue that's brewing, and it's going to be worse when they're all trying to get the $15,000 credit. Like, it's going to be worse.
Well, I've got a theory on how to fix the student loan problem. Make the university and in particular the endowments backstop those loans. If you make a bad loan, Legacy Mutual Mortgage has to buy it back.
But then if it's on their credit report, we have to count it.
Right,
So
but I'm saying in one way that fixes this problem is make the universities culpable for the bad student loans they're making.
yeah, they're the ones that allowed them to happen.
Because this poor teacher with $200,000 in debt, they're never going to be able to pay that back.
No, but he's counting on not paying it back because he's on this. Okay,
you
you served for 10 years as a teacher, which I think is fair, right? But it remains on his credit report, and it remains as a qualifying action item for us. You can't go FHA because he would, on a teacher's salary, never qualify for $2,000 a month in his debt ratio. That's like a house payment.
Yeah.
And then his credit is so bogged down and
With all
risky
those, yeah.
because of the trade lines. So conventional doesn't want him either.
All
So
right,
he's stuck.
We get back from the break and we're going to talk more about this. Jason Bible with Jennifer Hernandez of Legacy Mutual Mortgage.
I mean, it is a tornado.
Oh, it's crazy. And it's not going to get any better.
It's not. And
Because somebody has to keep the institutions. There's no liability back to the, you know what it comes down to? There's no liability back to the lender. That's the problem. It's like, you can't tell me a high school teacher needs a $250,000 education.
I don't know
Come
what they were,
on.
I don't know what they were getting. Like, I guess they get it for housing and apartment, and I don't know what they're spending it on. I don't know what the oversight was on approving those amounts.
Did you, where'd you get your undergrad at?
A&M.
Have you gone back and just looked and see what tuition is?
Well, no, but my friends who have kids that go there, just one year with room and board and tuition is like $25,000.
Okay, so and more than likely it's going to be 5 years, right? And that's assuming, and that doesn't include books and everything else. So let's call that.
So that's $125,000.
Yeah, $125K.
Where's all this other money coming from?
Well, and we can talk about where the inflation from higher education is coming from. I can tell you exactly where it is. So, you ready to go, A-Rock? Welcome back. Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate and Radio Network. I'm here with Jennifer Hernandez of Legacy Mutual Mortgage, and we're talking about student loan debt.
Yeah.
Something will have to happen. So one of the things that I'm reading a lot of stuff from Logan over at Housing Wire, and I think he's absolutely spot on in that the largest demographic ever in the United States turns 29 this year, and the median new home buyer is about 33. So they're predicting the next 5 years are going to be amazing. Now we're talking about student loan debt with a couple of folks that you're working with, and of course not everybody's like that, right?
Right.
One of the things that everyone laughed, and now it's coming to fruition, not to get into politics, one of the things John Edwards said when he was running with John Kerry for vice president, he said, look, there's two Americas out there, and the two Americas are coming to fruition in real estate. There's people who can afford a single family house, and there's people that cannot. And one of the analysis that Logan did at Housing Wire is he basically said, look, less than 50% of the population can afford a starter home. So that's that splitting of America, because we also know we have almost 200 years of research in the United States about building wealth. And we know that if you don't own a single family home, the likelihood of you generate any real wealth is almost 0%. That's why redlining was so damaging, because you had all these African American families that couldn't get into a single family house that would appreciate, that then they could borrow for money for the future to put their kids through college and all that. So it set back an entire generation. And now it's happening again, but it's happening with college-educated kids with a lot of student loan debt.
You're talking about way back there in early 2000s, right?
Right, yeah.
So we're going to digress for a minute, and I want to, so back then, I mean, I've been doing this since 95, but this is interesting. You'll find this super interesting. Okay. The listeners, I don't know, but just hang in there with me.
If we're entertained, it's fine.
So I was in the thick of it in 02, 03, and I was still a baby. I mean, I was still like 30. I was like barely, and I'd been doing this for 7-8 years, and I remember seeing somewhere, I was reading something that talked about the Fannie Mae requirement for the servicers, like, hey, if you're going to receive their government-sponsored entities, right? So if you're going to receive these sponsorships from us, 70% of your portfolio must be low to mod housing. So they put the stimulations like, hey, here's the carrot. We're going to give you all this money. And to do that, you just have to do the very simple task of making sure that you are bringing home ownership to more people.
Right.
It was like mandated.
Right.
And I didn't think of it anything at the time because I was just young. I mean, I didn't know.
You're like, oh, that sounds like a great idea.
I was in the thick of it. I was just like, loan in front of me, I'll originate it. Like people need house and, I'll do it. So I remember seeing things lightning. Like, I remember clearly, I was like, oh God, fast and easy? Like, we don't have to verify like returns? Or I was like, all right, cool. One thing less I got to do, right? And back then we were still using fax machines, okay? So I was like, all right, this is great. And so I just, there were these programs that kept coming out. And then I remember there was one where it was basically you fill out a one-page application. They had a social, they were breathing, they had a driver's license.
Here's your
and
house.
they got approved. Like it was even like barely when credit scores were starting. Okay. So I saw the guidelines tightening. Now I look back, and after '08 happened, now I know that memo from Fannie and Freddie to the GSEs, the people that are making the loans, that they were, and the loan makers were following direction, right? Well, this is how we have to lower our standards so that people can qualify.
Right.
Until they don't qualify anymore. So that happened. And now you're right. We're seeing a bubble, but it's of a different kind with different dynamics in a time that we've never seen before, ever. So there's nothing to base it on because we don't.
It's a new bubble.
It's a new bubble. And it's going to be interesting because now that credit scoring, there's no manual underwriting anymore. Like when I started in 95, I used to drive a 3-inch file of paper that I had highlighted and color-coded and sorted with color divider papers. I was like the best file presenter ever. And I would go and drive to certain underwriters that were my favorite. And I remember saying, listen, the Bible family, they're amazing. And they have this little kid and this pool, and they really want this house. And oh my God, listen, I know he's going to pay you on time. And they would be like, all right. Like I was a convincing story.
Yeah.
You could do that back then.
Right.
Now there's no human, like you either have the credit score or you don't.
Yeah.
You run it through the automated underwriting engine of Fannie or Freddie or FHA, and it either likes it or it does not. And you can meet the criteria on paper, like you can meet the credit score, you can meet the debt to income ratio, you can meet whatever you got to meet, right? And the automated underwriting engine can assess that you're riskier because of your mix of credit, your number of trade lines, because you have 60 entries from student loans, whatever. And it can say, nope, we don't like this one. And then you lower it 5% lower, more down payment. Nope, we still don't like it. And then you keep going farther. And eventually it's going to accept it.
Yeah, eventually it's going to do it.
But then does the client have 20% down?
Yeah.
I mean, probably not, right? So those are the kind of things that in real life and real on the street, on the firing line strategy we deal with is people that qualify on paper, but then in all of our automated stuff that we have to do, they don't qualify. And there's no exception. There's no manual underwrite.
Yeah.
There's just not. I mean, very few exceptions that I won't even go into, but it's like rare. And so I see that with the student loan debacle that we've been talking about. It's an issue that I'm just bracing myself because we're going to have to put a lot of people on homework and do what if scenarios. And I don't know how long this credit's going to last, right? Like, is it going to last for a year or two? I don't know. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. And it's, it's fascinating. You'll talk to an economist. I talk to a lot of economists, and it's fascinating. They'll say, all of them will say this. Well, Jason, there's no inflation. There's virtually no, you look at the CPI, there's virtually no inflation. And I'm like, yeah, but the CPI changes every administration. Like you remember back when oil hit $100 a barrel, they actually changed the CPI to reduce the weight of energy in the CPI. So the CPI is what calculates it's a consumer price index. It follows inflation for households. And inflation is just rising prices. And so one of the things that is fascinating is there's virtually no inflation, but for 4 different asset classes: automobiles, healthcare, real estate, and higher education.
That's everything.
Right. So the question is, well, wait a minute, why are those 4 areas experiencing all the inflation? And I'll tell people, it's simple. You have to have all 4 of those things to function in a modern service economy. In a modern Western economy, you got to have a car. You got to have health care at some point in the future. Usually it's older folks that do need health care. You got to have a roof over your head, and you have to be educated through higher education. That's where all the inflation is. And it's really easy for a banker to lend on that. That's why that's why the prices can keep going up
Yeah.
and up and up and up, because nobody has to pay cash for it. So we're headed headlong into, I believe there's ample proof out there that we have got a higher education bubble out there. You know, these folks are taking on $200,000 in debt, $300,000 in debt to make 80 grand a year. That's ridiculous.
Not even
right?
that. I'm
Yeah,
going to just tell you, not even.
not
Well,
even-
they're maybe taking lesser salaries to go into teaching so that they can get it forgiven.
so they can get it forgiven. Yeah.
Or some just aren't paying it and it goes into delinquency, and then you're never going to get a loan. Because
Yeah.
if you have a student loan, which is a federal loan, in delinquency, you cannot get a mortgage.
Yeah, and you can't ever discharge it either.
No.
Through. All right. When we get back from the break, we're going to talk more with Jennifer Hernandez of Legacy Mutual Mortgage. It's Jason Bible, Texas Real Estate Radio Network.
It's a fun topic.
I love talking about this kind of stuff because it's more. Here we go. Let's see.
Well, and for people in real estate, these are your tenants and these are your buyers
That's right.
of your flips.
That's right. Yeah.
So
This is who your peeps.
these are your people. This is your next paycheck.
But I will tell you this: if they do some kind of student loan forgiveness, you think real estate is hot now? I mean, it's just going to be, prices are going to go through the roof.
Yeah, I know.
You ready to go? Welcome back. Jason Bible. I'm here with Jennifer Hernandez of Legacy Mutual Mortgage. Jen, how do they get in touch with you?
Website. My website is Loan with Jen, LOAN with Jen.com, and all my contact info is there. That's probably the best way.
Okay.
And please like, share, and subscribe my YouTube channel, Loan with Jen.
It's great. It's
And
fantastic.
all my social media handles are Loan with Jen. And so I release 2 videos a week. It's become just this fun thing. I didn't really know where it was going when I really committed to it about a year ago. I thought, I don't know where it's going. I think I'm close to getting my first $19 check from YouTube, but that's not
frame
where
it.
I know. That's not where that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I've got a lot of knowledge. I've closed over 4,000 loans, and I want to give back to the industry that has been so generous with me. And I want people to get real facts, no BS. Like,
Yeah.
I want to save my clients hours of research on Google. Like, because when you go to look up stuff now, there's 50 different articles, and how do you know which one to
And
click?
they all contradict each other.
How do you
and
know
all-
what's
yeah.
right? I mean, some of the sources. So I send, of course, my pending clients there, but then others, I'm starting to get all these really great questions from people all over the country that I'm just like, hey, good luck. And I'm always touting, local lender, check with your
Yeah,
local
check your
lender.
local-
But
yeah.
watch my stuff if you're in Minnesota. Like, that's okay. Like, I want you to get good information, and it's just fun. It's a fun, ongoing project I'm really enjoying. So
Well, that's great. I do remember when you launched it, you're like, I got the new YouTube channel. I checked it out. I was like, okay, this is pretty cool.
it's when I met Connor.
Oh, that's
I
right.
was at
yeah.
an investor seminar, and Connor and he was like, "Yeah, I've got 20,000 YouTube," and I just said, and something just hit me in that little room off Richmond, and I thought, okay, and so I hired him to consult with me one time, and he gave me a checklist to do, and I was like, all right. Get your last Coke, and you got to get out of my office. My head's about to explode. You've been talking for an hour.
Yeah,
I got
time
my
for you to
marching
go.
orders, and so then I hired him again 6 months later, right? I hired people that I could surround myself with that knew it. So, and it's just turned into this fun thing. So
Fun
I'm
little-
having
fun
fun
little
with
side
it. Yeah,
project
it's,
there.
It's fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's and then that stuff. One of the things I didn't realize the value in a lot of that stuff when we started doing the whole social media thing is when people start watching you, and then they'll watch you over the years, and they'll say things like, y'all's message really hasn't changed much, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of until
Well, it's
there's
your
like
ethic. It's what
yeah,
you
it's like
believe in, yeah.
this is it hasn't changed a whole lot. This is kind of how the whole thing works, which is interesting. So to go back to kind of some of the, you said there's some predictions out there. Something's going to have to happen with the student loan market and all that other stuff. I mean, what?
Yeah, and I don't really know. I'm not as well versed on the subject. It's easy and I'm not judging it either. But anyway, I'm just talking about it from an angle of me being on the front line every day, trying to make home ownership possible for people that really want it and deserve it and need it. And I can't. all the
Yeah.
time because and so how do I'm going to somehow, I don't know, I'm going to have to make a video about it or something. I know some people that know some people at HUD, and I need to make sure, like, I don't even know if they realize or know that this is, I mean, honestly, if FHA would just lighten their guideline and follow the IDR requirement that conventional does, that right there would solve 75% of the problem.
But you
So-
gotta think those guys know that. That's
I
what's
mean,
so
but
fascinating.
how can they not? Like, I mean,
And that's an easy guideline for them to change.
it's one thing, like one thing. Just use the IDR for payback. That's
Yeah.
it. Income-driven repayment. It's super simple,
Yeah.
but it's not happening. So maybe it will. I don't know. Maybe it will now. But anyway, it's a super interesting topic. Listen, I think it would be great if the credit goes through, whether it's 15 or 10 or heck, if it's 8 again, like it was. I think that it's going to give people a helping hand. But then to get into the house, since it's probably not going to be at the time of closing, I would be super surprised because I would really want to know how the distribution of that is going to work. The complexity of, okay, let's just deliver that wire to closing, 15 grand. I don't know about that.
I can imagine rife with fraud. If I will tell you this, the PPP program, we've already seen, let's say, federal action. Like you can see they are starting to go after people, right? I mean, there's news stories about it.
Yeah.
And, if you remember when the PPP rolled out and some of these other programs, they ran them through the SBA, which was, why did you do it through the SBA? The IRS has all this information. Like, so you almost wondered if there was you almost wondered if Congress was in on the con. Like, because why wouldn't you do all this federally backed stimulus that go to people through the IRS instead of the SBA and through employers? It never made any sense. So I can't imagine a world where it would be like a credit at closing and then they pay the lender and all that.
Like, imagine how it would show up at title, like how, yeah.
It's got to be a tax credit at the end of the year.
But then it's gonna. I mean, I think there'll be an uptick in, of course, then the state-run programs for the down payment assistance, which here again, there's many people that want the assistance and they're right on the edge of qualifying, so they are just over, because when you get a dual household income, the limits for DPA are different, but for the most part, let's go with conventional for a minute. Because conventional, the limits are lower. So you have to be 80% of the median income instead of 100%. So let's go back to the student loans. Let's say you have a bunch of student loans, so you have to go conventional so we can count the IDR. You with me? Mm-hmm. Well,
so you go from, let's say, on $350,000 in student loans, you go from a $3,500 payment to
200 or zero. I have a girl right now she's zero. Okay, whatever the payment is. So we're going conventional, and then we're like, okay, cool. Let's look at down payment assistance because you don't have much money.
Right.
So then we look at DPA, and the limit on DPA is 80% of the median income, which is about $64,000. Versus FHA, it's like 84. Like FHA is more lenient in so many other areas. So then once again, you cut this borrower off at the knees because they have to go conventional because of the student loan. But then they can't get down payment assistance because they make $66,000 instead of 64. Like it's crazy.
So then here's what I can hear on the other side of Facebook and YouTube and all you guys that are listening, and in California and Jersey and all these other places. Well, maybe those people shouldn't get a house. And here's the problem, because I have this conversation with a lot of folks. If you can buy a house today, with exception to your taxes and insurance, you have fixed your housing cost today for potentially the rest of your life. So these folks now are stuck with landlords who, I can tell you right now, I raise my rent every year. Whatever the market rent is, that's where it's going. I have to, because my taxes and insurance are going up every single year.
Yeah.
I also run a fund. I have to be a good fiduciary of the families that invest in our fund. So do all the other folks that run these big Class A apartment complexes that have these giant REITs and all that other stuff. But the problem is if that person who is right on the edge can't get into a single family house, the likelihood that they'll ever build any real wealth in their family is almost zero.
Well, and homeowners are better employees.
Yes.
And
Yep.
better friends, and they're better everything.
Yeah.
Because they're just it's accountability starts with feeling ownership.
Right.
They're
Right.
more accountable to whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so I just think that people naturally, they have this pride of ownership. Oh my gosh, this is my place. I'm
This is
going to
my
take
community.
care of it.
It's my yeah.
I'm not saying that renters don't. I'm not lashing out at renters. I'm just saying that it's a step up in society where like, okay, I'm contributing. I'm part of something. I'm paying the mortgage. I'm being responsible. I've got, it's this whole encompassing psychological, social.
Plenty of studies that say gotta own your own home.
Right.
Like,
So
bar none, gotta own your own home.
I think everybody deserves to buy a home. So people are looking for down payment assistance because there's people, I can't tell you how many pay stubs year to date, 12/31 we saw where their year to date was half of what it was the year before.
Wow.
Because they had a certain number of months where they had to take cut hours, or they had a certain number of months where they had no hours, or, we're seeing it. And we have to count that lower income for qualifying. We understand COVID, but as lenders, we have to count. How do we know it's not going to happen again? How do we know you're going to go back full-time hours?
Yeah.
How do we know that, so we have to go off data. We can't go off future forecasted potential income. So it's for people that are hourly and not on a fixed salary, so we're qualifying different, and people have exhausted their savings. So yeah, they need a leg up. They need assistance. So the $15K, if it comes to fruition or however much amount, it's probably not going to come for closing to be for closing costs, but I could be super wrong.
We'll see.
I just don't know how it's going to administrated.
Yeah, we'll see. Well,
In a 30 to 45 day period from contract to close.
Yeah, I can tell you how well that's going to go. How do they get in touch with you, Jen? We're at the end of the show here.
Loan, LOAN, singular, with Jen.com. It's my website. All my info is there. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for being the guest today.
Yeah,
and we will
thank
see you
you.
guys tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a fun.
Wednesday or Thursday? Today is Thursday, right?